Welcome to the Impact Driven Leader podcast. This is your host, Tyler Dickerhoof. Today, joined by producer Alex. Today, we're going to get into talk about a little election stuff. Here it is, the election season. We're 1 week plus a day away from the United States presidential election. Before we go there, a couple things. May 7th and 8th, 2025, Spokane, Washington, Impact Driven Leader Summit, the second edition. We're going to have a phenomenal lineup of speakers. I want you to be there at the event. Make sure to go to impactdrivenleadersummit.com to get your seat, to sign up right now to make sure you can be there. You can also grab the video content from 2024 where we had speakers such as Katie Casada, John Maxwell, Graham Cochran, Jake Thompson. It was a phenomenal event. If you were there, you know it. If you weren't, then grab the video content. Enjoy, learn, grow with us. One more thing. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button, whether you're watching live on LinkedIn or on YouTube recorded. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, also the bell to get notified whenever we release new content. Today, we're going to talk about the elections. Specifically,
spicy.
We're going to talk about a topic that is showing up in a couple different ways, and that's ballot tampering. There was an article I read this morning, ballot boxes in Portland and Vancouver. That would be Portland, Oregon, Vancouver, Washington, lit on fire. I also did a little research, and there's been cases where ballot boxes, especially in mail-in states like you have in the West Coast, where ballot boxes are being tampered. It's a federal offense, much like, tampering with a mail receptacle. However, this is the question I have for you, Alex.
Yes.
One of the things that I read up on this is they don't expect much tampering because it's such an offense. Do you think that really matters?
It doesn't. And if you Google today ballot tampering, there are probably well over a dozen articles in different states, from Montana to Washington State to Denver, all the way to Russia, about Russians tampering with the U.S. election. It is going to be this next week. These next 2 weeks are going to be intense with voting. Anything to do with voting and interference of the election will be a hot topic.
So let me interject. Alex, you grew up in New Jersey, live in Florida, have lived in California. I grew up in Ohio, lived in California, now in Washington. Those are the states where I've been a registered voter. One thing for me growing up in Ohio, it was very normal to go to the local polling station. For us, it was the firehouse where you voted there. You had to write in an excuse like I'm traveling or whatever else in order to get an absentee ballot. What was it like in New Jersey growing up as far as how was voting done?
Very similar. Depending on the town you're in, some had it at like a park area, firehouse, police station, and it. Then, I mean, this is going back. I mean, I couldn't vote, but my parents did in the mid '90s, and it seemed easy. It didn't seem like there was a lot of these conspiracies. And then, going into the 2000s, I think, what was the first election? I think I was out of state for Obama that year. I was in Texas going to school. I was 18, and they had it on campus there. But it always seemed simple and easy and not very convoluted. It was only till recently. I mean, I guess till, what was it, 2016 election?
Well, one of the things that, again, bringing that up, Ohio, that's what it was like. Ohio is still a state where they have in-person voting. In Washington, for example, they don't have any in-person voting. If I wanted to go vote in person on Tuesday, there's nowhere to go vote. All ballots are mailed. So Washington is one of several states. I can pull up the graphic here because I looked at this earlier. I didn't know this. I again, learning just for our conversation here is the number of states that are mail-in. So Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Utah, and Colorado are mail-in states.
Wow.
Where everything is done by mail. And then you have also Vermont. The other states in the country, Hawaii is one of those mail-in states as well. The other ones where you have an option, you can do absentee, you can do in person. So there's nowhere for us to go to vote in person.
Yeah.
And, we get our ballots in the mail and then we drop it off at either a ballot box like we've talked about earlier that people have used as a
fire.
Well, I mean, they're cold. It's starting to get cold out here. I mean, there's some paper. They want to heat up. So, drop your drugs into it and light it on fire, and there you go. Well, that is tongue in cheek, but probably way more.
What happens to those votes? Do they just?
Well, that's the question. I posed that to Kelly as we were talking about this, getting ready for this. I'm like, so how do they know who voted or not? So those are all lost votes. So you can say they find the person, they put them in jail. But you know what? If there were 1,000 votes in there, I don't think that's unreasonable to think there's 1,000 votes in a ballot box. I just don't know. Those are all gone for all measures, for everything. And it's just, again, how can you say, oh, ballot tampering isn't an issue, where if there's someone that decided they wanted to ruin the election, go start burning every box in these mail-in states?
Oh, easily. I mean, yeah. I mean, you would need a coordinated effort, right? If we start seeing what seemed to be correlated and coordinated effort to burn ballot boxes in these states, I mean, then you got to be like, all right, well, this just seems too coincidental. We'll see. Well, I mean, this is the first time. I mean, like I said, Denver, if you Google it, Denver fraudulent, suspected fraudulent voter registration dropped off in Lancaster County, Montana,
County, they ended up
Colorado.
Firing an employee of one of the campaigns because they found out they were tampering with the ballot box.
Yeah.
So again, it's going on, and to sit here and say it can't happen, it won't happen, I think is very naive.
Bucks
but then
County.
The question is how do we handle this?
It's a good question. I mean, technologically speaking, there was just another one in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, destroyed ballot boxes. It seems to be coordinated to some degree. I mean, this is going to get more intense, but technologically speaking, there has to be. We're in 2024. There's so much technology out there. This manual processes of mailing stuff in, which leaves it to so much human error. I mean, don't you think there would be a way to say you could bank online? Obviously, there's scams and stuff like that anywhere online, but what about online? What about using some sort of online digital way to monitor and keep safe these votes that's very protected and safe? So you can see clearly, and maybe it's, blockchain technology, because, using the blockchain, you can see exactly where and how these votes are coming in. Maybe that's part of it. But I don't know. It just seems so old and manual of a process that could easily be disrupted. And I just, just going into how long have elections?
We can go back to the hanging chads in Florida. I mean, you go way back. Yeah. Remember that the election of I think it was 2004 maybe, and the contention about Bush being elected as president and the hanging chads, whereas they had a ballot system. You remember those old Scantrons that we used for tests? Yeah. It was essentially like that, and you marked out all the votes that you had. They put it into this machine, and it punched out your vote. Or you had it on I remember this. You had it on this board, and you would take a pen and you would punch out your vote. And that's how it read and scanned. And what happened is, if you didn't get it fully punched out, those little things were called chads. So if you didn't get it fully punched out, it couldn't read it. And they were saying that was the major issue in Florida. They were having to redo a lot of the vote reading because they had all these hanging chads. Look it up.
Ridiculous.
Just Google it. Hanging chads.
So old. I mean, voting's been going on in this country for 300 years? How long?
Well, 250 or what? 300? No. Yeah, 250, 200. I mean, since the 1750s, 1760s, give or
Yeah,
take.
so
Almost 300
it
years.
hasn't really changed all that much, technologically speaking. You
Yeah.
go somewhere, or you mail it, and you fill it out, or you punch it. I mean, we're all online. We're on our phones. I mean, there's got to be a better way to.
I mean, here you go,
monitor.
Elon. This is for Elon. Elon,
Okay.
you have the ability. You've done it. You've revolutionized it. Because here's the thing: is I don't trust anyone within the government to come up with a solution. And if we look at the interesting part, and this isn't partisan at all, but if you look at the states that are mail-in states, those are all predominantly Democratic held states. We have, the Pacific Coast, right? Democratic strongholds. You have New England. You have a lot of other states. It's like, okay, right, wrong. But much of the Democratic Party has been, hey, we want to make sure that we have availability to vote. That's one of their drivers. There's different organizations that are more partisan towards the Democratic side that are all about enabling people to vote, which is great. People should vote, right? That's a, U.S. right. The thing that I think is very interesting is, if we go back to Black Sheep, all right, let's go back to the movie Black Sheep, one of the all-time greats. I mean,
we got it. Who has? Or there's probably a lot of people who have not seen this movie.
You need to go watch it right now. If you have not watched the movie with Dana, it's not Dana Carvey. It is
Chris Farley and what's his name? I'll look it up.
It's not Dana Carvey, but David Spade.
David Spade, yeah.
So it's one of their classic movies, and there's an election. And what they end up finding out is there are votes from people that have passed away. And so there's voter manipulation. Here's the thing. Somebody doesn't just magically make that up. That means that's going on, right? That has happened. Sure. It's been, identified as happening. So when we have these situations where we want to allow more voters, and you have different states that are saying, hey, let's make sure that real people are actually voting. I look at it as, for example, if you're registered to vote, and I don't know how often they sweep it, think about this. All right, let's just play this out. This is a possibility. I'm in a mail-in voting state, right? I'm in a mail-in voting state. Say, for example, those ballots were mailed out like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. Say, for example, I were to pass away between now and the election. Mm-hmm. My ballot's out there. My wife could fill out my ballot, and it says vote. So then is there a backwards, like, where's the death certificate? How do we qualify votes? I mean, that's just a very short term. But when you start thinking about how do we verify who's actually voting, and, or, I understand when you register to vote, that's how you end up getting it mailed to you. But you can understand it doesn't take in some, races much more than a 1% to 2% to completely change the result.
But that's again where I go back to technology. I mean, there's your phones have fingerprint technology, facial recognition. Yeah. When you got to sign up for some things, you got to put your face up. Yeah. I mean, they have the tech,
a notary type situation, right? You can do DocuSign. You can do all those,
so much stuff where there could be mitigated manipulation or fraud or any of that. Technologically speaking, through our phones, which 99% of Americans, I want to say, have at least one of those types of devices.
And I think that's where you look into the option. I know this is the argument. It's like not everyone has the ability to have, whether it's identification, so forth and so on. It's like, okay, I get that. I get some of that, but you're trying to lower the bar, which brings in manipulation, as opposed to how do we make sure, like it's often been said, hey, we need to, not have voter ID requirements. And this has been the argument because not everyone has the opportunity to get to a polling center or doesn't have the opportunity to have proper identification for whatever means. And my thought is well, instead of lowering the bar that it takes to verify voters, why don't we find ways to get those people identification? Why don't we find ways to support those people? That seems to me like a more viable solution towards the I would say, sanctity of the process rather than, you know what, we're going to allow a lot of the impropriety just so we can lower the bar.
Do you think a lot of people are not going to turn out to vote, given the fact that both? I don't mean it's subject matter, but I mean it's still connected.
It's still all of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have two candidates that are not very liked. I mean, your side likes your side, and people who like these people like these people. Do you think there is going to be this? Because there's always been this kind of issue of getting people out to vote, and whether it's how easy it is, like you said, the process of registering to vote, mailing it in, going somewhere. It's not the most simple and easy thing. I think anyone who's over 18, probably to like 30, they grew up with phones and technology and just like, hey, I want it on my phone, I'll do it on my phone. But do you think that people won't turn up? It's going to be a low turnout, or you think it's going to be the opposite?
So I just searched, and it says 44,101,704 mail-in and early in-person votes cast nationally, which I think typically we end up with like just over 120 million votes. I think at the last election, it was somewhere, give or take, maybe that at most.
A little more than 1/3 of the country.
Yeah. And there's 44 million roughly mail-in and early. There's 60 million mail-in and early in-person votes requested. Here's the interesting piece of that. And that's on NBC News Decision 2024 early vote information. I think what's coming and what's been seen in a lot of states thus far is that there's a greater request for mail-in votes in states that it isn't, the policy. And also there's been a lot of early votes that have been accepted. Like, we may have one of the biggest voter turnouts in recent history is what's been mentioned. Does that end up being the case? I don't know, but it seems that way, which, as we've just mentioned with the ballots, with, the ballot box tampering, with those things, here's just science. It's just statistics. You're going to have a greater percentage of manipulated vote just by sheer number of the highest number of votes ever.
Right.
That's statistics, right? You're not going to see, we have the highest number of votes ever, we're going to have the lowest percentage of tampering. It just doesn't work like that. That's not prudent statistics. So then you get into it, it's like, well, how much of an impact does it make? Especially in swing states where it's close.
Yeah. Is Washington considered a swing state?
No, not even. No, it is very heavy to one side.
To the left? It's
to the Democratic side.
Yeah, yes. To the Democratic.
Very heavy.
Pennsylvania, where there's also some tampering, is a massive swing state. Some say it could decide the election.
Yeah.
So Florida is another. Where you grew up, isn't Ohio?
Ohio typically is, but I think this year it's not considered. Michigan is, Wisconsin is, a lot of those traditional Midwest blue collar states. It's very.
What do you think about technology and its use here to improve this process?
So I don't know if you drive a Tesla. I don't think you guys have.
I don't. No, gas powered still.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Do you have Starlink?
We do not have Starlink.
Okay.
No.
Do you? So I have. We have Starlink. I have Starlink in the studio. It's the do not have a Tesla, but I am a Starlink customer, and this is the thing that I know about that company. They make it easy, and it's a lot of AI. Meaning, if I had a problem with one of my products, and it was a little bit cumbersome, but once I got to the solution, it was done and it was easy. And so, coming back to my quip. If you wanted to say, hey, here's a challenge, Elon, totally revolutionize the voter process in the United States by 2028, he'll have it done by the end of 26. Yeah, I can guarantee that would be done because of the technology, the drive, the infrastructure, the safety. You put that challenge on him and say, hey, Elon, this needs to be better. Look at all this tampering. And I say that because show me somebody else who has the technological desire and the whim to just do it just because he feels like it should be done. Like, here's a guy that thinks, oh, we should have better internet service. All right, let me go launch 1,000 satellites or something crazy, and let me just totally change the way that our entire world gets internet service, because he has.
Yeah.
Totally single-handedly has.
There's another story. I think it's like New York State. They spent something crazy, like $42 billion to get Wi-Fi like all over, and they like barely have gotten anything done. And if they spent that on Starlink, you got to Google it. It's like, New York State and invests in Wi-Fi and, internet, all this for all over the state of New York. New York's a big state, not just New York City. And it's like, if they just use Starlink, dude, they would have had everything up and running and operational and done very fast and efficiently. And this
probably in a 2-week period.
Towers and, you see the 5G towers up and everything. It's so old and primitive now compared to what Starlink can do. I'm sure you're right. I think if Tesla, Elon comes up with,
look at SpaceX. They just caught a rocket with a tower. Like, dude,
the thing lands, shoots in the air and lands.
Here's the thing.
Reusable.
Let's be honest. Maybe he needs to teach the jet receivers how to catch a ball.
Oh my God! Don't we got to go into the Jets? You have to poke me. Oh my God! Talk about the biggest.
My Browns finally scored 20 points and won a game.
Season's over.
Come on!
God.
I got to gloat
Brutal.
for the moment that I get to. So going back to the ballot tampering and just the ability for technology there, I think it's going to play a factor.
Yeah.
And here's the problem.
It has to.
What's one of the largest complaints from the Democratic side, from Kamala's campaign? What's one of their biggest complaints towards the Trump camp?
Them always complaining about the election and how it was rigged and all those
the
things.
Validity of it. And, that's where it's kind of, I think we're set up for whichever way it's going to be. Either side is going to complain about the validity of the election. And here's what I would say. Based upon what we've seen in the last handful of weeks and what's probably going to happen in the next week, both sides have a legitimate complaint.
Absolutely.
And one side is going to absolutely go bonkers, and the other side is going to say, hey, this is what we told you. Like, this happened last time. It's been a trend, and yet we don't want to do anything to address it. We just have more issues here.
What if it's a complete landslide victory? Then can you still do that?
Well, I think we've proven, well, I don't want to say proven, but I think the polling has, whether it's through the media agencies or whatever else, has kind of identified that, man, this thing's all over the place. And no one will really know until, sometime maybe on November 6th. I don't think we will, it'll be when I go to bed at probably, 8:45 Pacific time, between 8:45 and 9 o'clock Pacific time on November 5th. My guess is we do not yet know who will be the next president. That's my speculation.
That's speculation. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's around 11:45 my time. I'll hopefully be in bed by then. I think you're right. I think oh my God. 2016, it was the very late at night. I want to say it was either like 4, 5, 6 in the morning, something super late. Because I remember going to work the next day, and I had worked at Huffington Post at that time, which is very not conservative, very liberal news organization, and people were crying and holding each other, and I'm just like, we still got to make a lot of videos today. What's everyone doing? He won, or Trump won that election, and I'm one of those. I got to go about my business and do what I have to do. It's what can you do? Why get emotional?
And I think that's where it's kind of like this, man. I'm a Browns fan. You're a Jets fan. Unfortunately, we have been conditioned to losing. We don't like it. Don't like it. Don't like it at all.
No, hate it.
Don't like it. But you're conditioned to it. You get some teams where, let's say, like for years, the Patriots had a hard time losing.
Yeah.
They didn't like it. They thought everyone was out to get them. Now they're on the losing end of the stick for the most part. For the most part.
For those that don't know, the Patriots just beat the Jets by like 3 points with 10 seconds left. Not that I was watching. I did not watch the game, actually. I did not. I stopped. That's sad. When I stopped watching the Jets after 8 games, the season's just in the dumpster fire. Anyway.
But I think coming to where we're at, I mean, we're going to have situations where people will not know how to handle a loss.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, tons of people don't know how to handle losses and failure and whatever you want to call it. But that's, I guess for me, I move forward and, even when things I actually, like you use the Jets, I care. I'm a season ticket holder. I really love the team. We lose. I'm upset for about 20, 30 minutes, give or take. And I go on to the next thing. And I get it. I mean, this is something bigger, the party that's going to run the country for the next 4 years. But, if you voted and you submitted your vote and it goes one way or the other, what else can you do? What else can happen? Yeah. I mean, it is what it is.
And I think it's evident. There has been, there will be ballot tampering.
And look at the elections.
How do we handle it?
All over the world, right? Georgia, I think this former Soviet Union country of Georgia just had an election, and there's Google, former country of Georgia, all over the internet, tampering, manipulation, Brazil. I mean, it happens.
Venezuela,
Venezuela, South American countries, European countries, African countries. I mean, this stuff happens still to this day. It's
more and more widespread, which I would go, even for Elon, it's more of a business opportunity for you, buddy. Like, come on.
We got to get Tesla voting machines. What would you call a Tesla voting machine? You got SpaceX, you got what's the
Starlink.
Tesla. What do you call a Tesla? What's a voting machine by Tesla?
I don't know. I don't. That's a great question.
Vote something. It's got to be like Vote Link.
Yeah, but you could see it being in like, maybe a nod at that point to, something South African. So, I mean, could it be he's Canadian by way of South Africa and then to the US. So it's a real hodgepodge, but you think he has to give like some credence to some of that journey.
It's going to be Vote Link or Vote X. I don't know.
I mean, yeah. I don't know. Just V.
Yeah.
Just V.
V. Just vote in the V.
All right. So as we wrap up here, as we kind of condense our thoughts, we're setting ourselves up. Next week, we're going to do a live election day kind of commentary. Where are we at? What's going on? How are we handling things? And it will be interesting as we make note right now. Is what's going to be the commentary that day based upon ballot tampering? What's going to be the commentary that day as far as voter turnout? And then I think the other part of it is one thing that we're not talking about, and that I think is going to play a heavy part, is what about all of the Congress elections?
Yeah.
What happens there? Like, how does that start to determine whatever presidency we have next?
Yeah.
What they're able to do or not do. And I think that's a major consideration. So those are kind of the ideas and thoughts that I know we'll tap into next week. Any other thoughts there, Alex?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, the other thing, we're going to go over is just the impact it will have, if you're a business leader, entrepreneur, there's a lot of Trump and Harris have two different plans, tax plans, incentivization programs for businesses and leadership that we should all be aware of. And I think it'll be important to highlight those differences, next week when we, get to voting and to see what's going to kind of unfold before us and how we can better prepare ourselves as leaders, as business leaders. So absolutely.
That, the tax threshold is going to be a big story on the two sides, meaning is one, are people, where do they sit tax basis? The other one is what do they try to do to, stay in or out of certain thresholds? Yeah.
Tariffs. Trump. Did you listen? Oh, you know what? Did you listen to Joe Rogan, Trump?
I have not. I know Kelly saw it. I have not. I'm really not a Rogan guy.
I listened to the whole. I listened to some of his episodes, but I think Donald Trump's favorite word is stupid. He must have said stupid 100 times. I was like, oh my God, I can't listen to my son in the car.
Straight and to the point. I mean, it is what it is.
I know. And then tariffs. He must have said tariffs about another 100 times. His plan, it's a good listen. I mean, it's 3 hours long. It's a long podcast. But Trump actually wants to lower the tax bracket from 21 to 15%, and then just go back old school to tariffs, which he thinks is his biggest negotiating chip, which has worked in the past to help the country out and the people out financially here in the U.S. And I'm interested, to dig a little more.
Let's digest that just real quick, right? We have a couple minutes to digest it. As you understand tariffs, as you understand the United States, where we stand today, how do you think tariffs would affect us as a country economically?
It could and should positively impact us from a financial standpoint if we're collecting more on these tariffs. So a country, for instance, say we import vehicles from a country. Well, we can put a tariff, right, on each and every one of those vehicles by 10%, 20%, 100%, 2,000%, right? And so then they would have to pay us way more money, right, basically, to import whatever product it is that they're coming to this country, which would financially positively impact the country's wealth if they continue to do so. So that's how I know and understand tariffs to that degree.
Here's the piece of that I think is interesting that maybe everyone doesn't understand. There's been kind of some commentary that if we impose tariffs, it's going to drive up the cost of our goods.
I've heard that. Yes, of course.
Well, here's the piece of that. I would say if we look at the United States as a economy of the world, we are one of the largest consumers as a single entity as a country. We consume a lot of goods, both internal and also what is brought into the country. Here's one thing that I believe that if I look back upon my experience is the best way to drive financial soundness is by driving business efficiency, meaning whatever we can do to drive income, that's going to help our business, right? If you continue to cut and cut and cut, you can only cut so much until you are no longer viable, right? And then it's just difficult. And so it's kind of like, what's the best ways? Like, hey, if I can improve the performance of my business, meaning we're turning more product, we have greater demand for our product, we have greater domestic demand, whatever that may be, it actually is very helpful. Well, here's something that I would tend to believe that most people that are in commodity tradings, the global commodity trading would say, please bring on tariffs. Part of that is my understanding is we actually have a very hard time competing in the global market because of the regulations we have in the United States that other countries don't. The regulations that we have that limit our ability to maybe technologically advance. Yeah. I saw just a clip the other day. There's somebody that I followed. They do a phenomenal called Discover Ag. So it's a podcast by two ladies. They do a phenomenal job of going through agricultural issues. And they were talking about how in Argentina, they know every ounce of beef, where it is born, raised, and where it ends up in a store. They have all of that technology. Why don't we in the US? Because we end up becoming such an importer that it gets lost, and we just don't have the infrastructure in the system because there's not enough internal demand for it because we're constantly competing with lower price producers from around the world. So I look at tariffs saying, hey, Some people may think that's going to raise our costs. I actually think that's going to make us more internal sustainable, which is going to help us as a country where we're going to provide more jobs. We're going to provide better opportunities. I think it could be a very, very healthy thing. And one of the things that concerns me, and again, this is speaking from agriculture, so understand this perspective. The worst thing that we could do in the safety of our rural communities and our food supply is have government step in and manipulate or try to control food pricing. Because what most people don't understand is our farmers in the United States don't make much money. It's a very, 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 very hard industry. And really where a lot of the money is in the middleman, the processors. It's not the grocery stores. It's not the farmers. It's the middlemen. And a lot of times, a lot of that margin is so high because of all the regulations and we have so much consolidation that the system, what we need better put through. So we need less competition externally where we can process more internally so we're more efficient. We can actually make better quality products for the consumers. So that's just kind of a little bit of a commentary rant.
Yeah, no, my last note on that is I agree. I feel that it's shifted so much over the years that I've noticed over the last, 37, actually aware of all this, 25 years, where it's just been this massive shift of just American products, whether that is agriculture, the food we eat, the things we have in our home, the products we have, everything over the years just continues to be made overseas. And it has, deteriorated to the point of, almost non-existent, any sort of industry purely made in the US. And I think that's horrible. It's not a sustainable way of living, even though, you can get 99-cent chapstick or 25-cent this or whatever from some online Amazon type of, I can't remember. My wife uses it. It's so horrible, some of the shit we get. Oh my God. It's ridiculous, but it's so cheap, and they kind of gamify it so they get you to buy like random tchotchkes. It's horrible. But I just do think we need to go back, and I think that's the point of the tariffs is let's reinvigorate American business, American industries across the board, like the automotive industry that's been freaking crushed. Farmers, everyone, so that we can be a self-sustaining country once again, and, limit how much we import and rely on external, countries to have a profitable, business country. So,
yeah. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Again, look forward to seeing you next time. Remember to hit the subscribe button, the bell. We release podcasts each Wednesday. So make sure that you sign up so you're notified for all of that. Till next time, choose to lead with impact.